Chapter 233. The next morning, Larry woke up to a faint headache. With Roxanne in mind, he tidied himself up and headed to the room next door. Right when he opened the door, he saw the door to the left of Roxanne's room being pulled open at almost the same time. The next moment, a familiar figure walked out. Lucian was also worried about Roxanne, so he had come out to check on her. To his surprise, he ran into Larry. When he met the latter's eyes, he knitted his brows lightly. Nonetheless, he greeted Larry politely. "It's been a while, Mr. Morrison." Larry recognized Lucian. However, he was hesitant to speak. First, after all, the conference organizer was the one who booked the hotel for them. It was just an average hotel in Belridge, and, considering Lucian's status, he thought there was no reason for him to stay at a place like this. T was only when Lucian spoke to Larry that the latter was sure of the former's identity. After a short pause, Larry smiled and nodded. "Hello." Lucian gave a nod in response, and walked up to Roxanne's door. Nonchalantly before knocking on it, Larry stiffened, and a thought immediately ran through his head. Did Lucian check into this hotel because of Roxanne? What's going on between them? With that in mind, Larry hesitated for a bit before approaching Lucian. "Mr. Farwell, do you need anything from Roxanne?" he asked casually, raising his brow. Lucian replied, "She wasn't feeling well last night, so I brought her back. Naturally, I have to check on her." His answer confirmed the doubts Larry had. The latter smiled gently. "It's nice of you to be concerned, Mr. Farwell, but I don't think Roxanne wants to see you." Instantly, Lucian's eyes darkened, and the atmosphere around them turned tense. Yet, Larry acted as though he noticed nothing. With the smile still on his face, he calmly turned to face the door to Roxanne's room. Inside, Roxanne had already woken up, washed her face, and brushed her teeth. When she heard the knocks on the door, she thought it was Larry, so she walked over and opened it without much thought. At the sight of the two men standing in front of her, she was startled. "Why are you here?" she asked Lucian. "If I recall correctly, his hotel is near the restaurant where we ate last night. Why is he here so early in the morning? What does he want from me now?" Lucian's brows were scrunched up as he studied her. Noticing that she looked better than the night before, he was relieved. "It's better to go the second mile. Since sent you back last night, it's natural that I make sure you're fine the next morning." Roxanne smiled and said, "Thank you for your concern. I just drank a bit too much last night, but I'm fine now." She no longer had anything to say to him after that. Turning to Larry, she spoke in a friendlier tone. "Larry, what's up?" "Nothing much. I'm just worried since you said you weren't feeling well last night," said Larry gently. The smile on Roxanne's face seemed more sincere when she talked to Larry. "Sorry for making you worry, Larry. I'm okay now." "That's good to hear," replied Larry smilingly. After the brief exchange, Roxanne looked at Lucian, who was still standing in the me spot. With a light frown, she prompted, "Mr. Farwell, is there anything else?" Lucian felt upset after seeing how Roxanne and Larry interacted with each other. Despite knowing that Roxanne was hinting at him to leave, he nodded firmly in response to her question. Chapter 234. Roxanne was perplexed at seeing him nod. "It's almost time for breakfast. If you don't mind, we can have it together." Lucian looked at the two calmly. Roxanne's and Larry's expressions changed. They did not understand what Lucian meant. It took a moment before Roxanne came back to her senses. She forced a smile and said, "You're a busy man. I need some time to finish packing, and I don't want to waste your time. I'll eat on my own later." Lucian replied with a smile, "It's all right. I don't have much on my schedule today. I can wait." Roxanne could feel her head start to hurt again. She smiled and continued, I'm afraid you won't be used to the food we eat. Lucian remained unfazed. Rest assured, I'm not a picky eater. Roxanne was speechless. This man stands at the top of the commercial world. I've made it evident that I don't want to have breakfast with him. He is doing this on purpose. What on earth does he want? Roxanne's head started to hurt even more. In the end, she decided to use Larry as an excuse. I have something to tell Larry after breakfast, and it won't be convenient for you to be around, Mr. Farwell. She then looked at Larry pleadingly. The latter smiled warmly and turned to look at Lucian. That's right. We do have something to discuss. Can we have some time alone? Lucian was displeased at seeing how the duo was on the same page. However, he said calmly, is that so? I'll leave when it's time for you to speak. Roxanne did not anticipate that Lucian would be so thick-skinned and was about to find another excuse when she heard him mention what had happened the night before. You must remember that you said you'll buy me coffee last night, Miss Jarvis. However, I ended up paying, so that did not count. Also, I sent you home last night. If at all. These up, I'm sure it's not too much for me to ask for breakfast, right? Lucian looked at the petite woman before him. Upon hearing this, Roxanne relented. Give me a moment. I'll go get changed. She hoped that Lucian would keep his word after breakfast, and they would go their separate ways. Roxanne closed the door and headed back in. The duo outside the door had different expressions. Larry continued smiling, warming. He was displeased just thinking about Larry's close relationship with Roxanne. After Roxanne finished packing, the three went down to have breakfast together. As Lucian was around, Roxanne and Larry were reticent. The atmosphere was simply depressing. Lucian, however, casually asked about their plans for the day. I wonder what plans the both of you have after breakfast. Roxanne's fork paused midair and she raised her eyes to look at the man sitting across from her. Why are you interested in our plans? Do you not have plans of your own? Lucian pursed his lips. It isn't easy for friends to come together like this. Can't we go out and spend some time together? He glanced at Larry and asked Roxanne meaningfully, or do you mind me disrupting your couple time together, Miss Jarvis? Roxanne's expression changed slightly. Roxanne retracted her gaze and her emotions were in turmoil. She did not know what Lucian wanted from her. Chapter 235. The sudden ringing of the phone broke the tense atmosphere at the dining table. As Lucian's mind was preoccupied with Roxanne's relationship with Larry, he picked up the call without looking at the phone. The moment the call went through, he heard a female's concerned voice. Lucian, I heard you went to Baldridge for a business trip. How are things? Have you settled them? Aubrey had gone to the office yesterday to look for Lucian and ended up making a wasted trip. She found out that Lucian had gone to Baldridge only after she asked Sonia. As such, she had called him early in the morning to show concern toward him. She had thought that he would not pick up like all the previous times she called, yet little did she expect him to pick up the phone so quickly. Aubrey thought that Lucian had finally let go of his prejudices against her, and her voice was filled with delight. Lucian frowned upon hearing her voice and subconsciously looked at Roxanne. As they were quiet, Roxanne and Larry heard the voice coming from the other side of the phone even without intending to do so. Roxanne's gaze darkened the moment she heard the voice. She remembered Aubrey's words from their last encounter. Roxanne was the third party between her and Lucian. The call also reminded Roxanne that regardless of Lucian's attitude on the matter, he would become engaged to Aubrey soon. It was only fitting that she kept her distance from him. As she recalled this, she put down her fork, smiled politely at Lucian, and got up to leave. Upon seeing this, Lucian said to Aubrey, over the phone without a second of hesitation. I'll have to attend to something. I'm hanging up now. He looked up and wanted to say something to Roxanne. However, he saw her get up and stumble, with a startled look on her face. Lucian frowned deeply and quickly stood up without hanging up the phone. Roxanne was in a hurry to leave and had accidentally knocked into the chair beside her. She let out a short yelp that ended the very next second. Be careful. Lucian held his phone in one hand and her wrist in the other. Roxanne thought he had ended the call and thanked him softly after hearing what he said. All of Aubrey's delight was swept away when Lucian said he was going to hang up the call. Just as she was about to say something, she heard the yell of a woman coming from the other side of the phone. That voice sounded familiar to her. She eyed the screen and did not know why Lucian had yet to hang up. She bit her lip and remained silent. Have to find out the identity of the woman. However, little did she expect to hear Roxanne saying thanks the next second. The moment she heard Roxanne's voice, she gritted her teeth and hung up the call. With a grave expression, she threw her phone onto her bed violently. It's that bitch, Roxanne again. Have already warned her the last time. To think that she has the cheek to appear before Lucian also. Based on what I heard, Lucian hung up that phone because of her. Aubrey's face turned red from anger. She thought that Lucian had finally had a change of heart when the call went through. Never did she expect Lucian to give her such a big surprise. That bitch is out to provoke me. Aubrey clenched her fists so tightly that her fingernails dug into her palm and her eyes were filled with hatred. Chapter 236. What's wrong? Why are you so upset? Gina heard the commotion upstairs. Upon entering the room, she saw Aubrey's expression and walked up concernedly. She sat down on the bed and held Aubrey's hand. The moment she sat down, Aubrey flung her hand away forcefully. Lucian is with that beach again. Gina's face clouded over. How could it be? Didn't Mrs. Farwell speak to Lucian already? Is there some kind of misunderstanding? Aubrey was livid just from thinking about Roxanne's voice and Lucian's indifferent attitude toward her. I heard that bitch's voice. There's no way it's a misunderstanding. Lucian's attitude just now made it clear that I was disrupting them. Otherwise, why would he want to hang up the moment the call went through? That bitch left without a word all those years ago. What on earth did she do to seduce Lucian? Now that she's back, Gina furrowed her brows. Isn't Lucian on a business trip? Why would he be together with her? It was still fine if Gina did not bring this up. However, now that she did so, Aubrey gritted her teeth and ventured a guess. He claims it's a business trip, but he could have gone all the way there to look for that bitch. Otherwise, why would they be together so early in the day? Looking at the time, does this mean they were together the night before as well? At that thought, Aubrey suddenly got up from the bed. She could not sit still, but she could not think of any solution at that moment either. Gina's expression soured when she heard this. Lucian's wedding with Aubrey had already dragged on for 6 years. Although Lucian had been postponing the wedding, they were never once worried that it would not happen. After all, Lucian did not have any woman near him except Aubrey. However, things were different now that Roxanne knew is back in the country. Lucian had made known his intentions to break off the engagement, and things could not continue this way. Aubrey turned around, held Gina's hand, and suggested, with a face full of concern, Mom, why don't we speak to Mrs. Farwell again? Gina only hesitated for a moment before shaking her head slowly. Then what should we do? Do we leave things be and watch Lucian get together with that bitch? Aubrey asked through gritted teeth. She felt her blood boil the moment she pictured Lucian and Roxanne getting together. Gina patted the back of her hand reassuringly. Calm down. Even though Mrs. Farwell can help you say a few words, we can't go to her every time. She'll feel annoyed. She gave Aubrey a meaningful glance and continued gently. We can't always depend on Mrs. Farwell. You have to come up with ways to make Lucian like you. Aubrey's eyes flickered, but she looked conflicted. But Lucian doesn't even want to see me because of what happened with Estella. That is because you aren't chasing him hard enough. Gina stood up and held Aubrey's hand. Go buy a ticket to where he is now. You'll get to meet him eventually. Aubrey remained hesitant. Lucian's head is filled with that bitch. Wouldn't I be humiliating myself? Gina continued to advise, regardless of Lucian's attitude. He is with that woman now. If you don't show up, that woman will not know her place. Even if you go over now and can't see him, you can deal with her. As long as she has some decency, she'll know to keep a distance from Lucian. After a long pause, Aubrey agreed to the suggestion, through gritted teeth, and bought a ticket to Baldridge.